You think 1970s pasta was all canned spaghetti and hamburger helper? Think again. These suburban kitchens and urban dinner tables served up some of the most creative, economical, and surprisingly sophisticated pasta recipes in American food history. Let's dig into 25 pasta recipes you never knew were actually defining what it meant to gather around the family table in the 1970s. Before we move to the foods, don't forget to subscribe our channel and press the bell icon for upcoming video. Macaroni and cheese. Before Kraft dominated every pantry, homemade macaroni and cheese meant something profound in 1970s America. As the energy crisis sent food prices soaring, mothers turned elbow macaroni, butter, sharp cheddar, and whole milk into a weekly declaration of family stability. This wasn't the radioactive orange powder version. Home cooks boiled pasta until tender, layered it with hand-shredded cheese and Pyrex dishes, poured over a flour-thickened milk sauce, then baked until golden and bubbling. The top formed that coveted crispy crust, while underneath, creamy cheese created pockets of molten comfort. Served on formica tables across suburban developments and urban apartments, this dish represented economic dignity during tough times. Kids scraped their plates clean, and leftovers cold from the fridge became breakfast for teenagers. It was the taste of home, the smell of security, and the center of countless Wednesday night dinners when nothing else felt certain. Pasta e fagioli. Italian grandmothers brought this peasant dish to American suburbs, where it became the ultimate budget stretcher. In the 70s, as families discovered ethnic cooking beyond spaghetti and meatballs, pasta e fagioli represented authentic Italian poverty cuisine, transformed into middle-class comfort. Home cooks sautéed onions, celery, and garlic until fragrant, added canned tomatoes and white beans, then simmered for hours until flavors married. Small pasta shapes like tortellini went in near the end, absorbing the thick tomatoey broth. What made it distinctly 70s was the addition of bacon or ham hocks for smoky depth, plus a heavy hand with black pepper and dried oregano from those green shaker bottles. Served with crusty Italian bread for dunking, it fed 8 people for under $3. Leftovers thickened overnight into something between soup and stew. Working mothers loved it because they could start it before work and let it bubble all day. Macaroni with tomato and garlic. This was the gateway drug to Italian-American cooking for families, just discovering garlic wasn't just for pizza joints. In the 1970s kitchens, as Americans slowly shed their white bread blandness, this simple combination became revolutionary. Fresh garlic cloves minced with a knife, not the jarred stuff, sizzled in olive oil until golden and fragrant enough to perfume the whole house. Canned crushed tomatoes went straight into the pan with a pinch of sugar to cut the acidity, then simmered until slightly thickened. Elbow macaroni or shells tossed in meant every crevice caught that garlicky sauce. The dish arrived at the table with a snowstorm of parmesan and fresh basil if you were fancy, dried if you weren't. Teenagers discovered garlic bread made from this same technique. Fathers who grew up on meat and potatoes couldn't believe something so simple tasted so complex. It cost pennies, took 20 minutes, and represented American families cautiously embracing flavors their parents never knew existed. Chicken tetrazzini, named after an opera singer but perfected in American church basements, chicken tetrazzini became the quintessential 1970s casserole for turning Sunday's roast into Monday's miracle. After weekend chicken dinners, resourceful cooks shredded leftover meat and combined it with spaghetti, cream of mushroom soup, sour cream, and those canned mushroom pieces that defined the era. Butter sautéed onions added depth, while sherry added sophistication, making home cooks feel like Julia Child. The mixture went into buttered baking dishes, topped with breadcrumbs mixed with melted butter and parmesan, then baked until golden and bubbling at the edges. The result hit somewhere between casserole and pasta bake, creamy and rich enough to mask that the chicken was technically leftovers. Church potlucks featured 5 versions. Bridge club meetings centered around who made theirs best. Kids didn't realize they were eating recycled dinner. It represented American ingenuity, where nothing went to waste and yesterday's ordinary became today's special. Penny with garlic and olive oil. While most Americans still thought olive oil belonged in tins for earaches, adventurous 1970s cooks discovered aglio e olio through Italian neighbors and early food magazines. This minimalist masterpiece required confidence and good ingredients, both rarities in avocado green kitchens. Fresh garlic sliced paper thin, sizzled in real olive oil, not the vegetable oil most families used, until it turned golden and nutty. Red pepper flakes added heat that seemed exotic then. Penny, cooked just short of mush, got tossed directly into that garlicky oil with pasta water to create a silky coating. Fresh parsley and parmesan finished it, though many substituted the dried versions. What made it revolutionary was the absence of tomato sauce, cream, or cheese soup. Americans weren't used to pasta that showcased ingredients rather than burying them. Italian-American families served this late at night after gatherings. Adventurous suburbanites discovered that simple didn't mean boring, it meant letting quality ingredients shine. Chicken spaghetti. Southern and southwestern home cooks transformed basic spaghetti into a creamy, spicy casserole that became potluck royalty. This wasn't Italian, it was pure Americana with a Texas twang. Boiled chicken got shredded and combined with broken spaghetti, cream of chicken soup, rotel tomatoes with green chilies, processed cheese food that melted like velvet, and enough black pepper to make it interesting. Bell peppers and onions sautéed until soft added vegetables to appease mothers worried about nutrition. Everything mixed together in a massive roasting pan, then baked until bubbly and slightly crispy around the edges. The result was creamy, tangy, mildly spicy, and completely addictive. Church socials required 3 pans minimum. Covered dish suppers weren't complete without someone's version. The processed cheese created that smooth, nacho-like consistency that defined 70s comfort food. It reheated beautifully, froze perfectly, and represented American regional cooking at its unpretentious best. Kids ate it without complaint, which alone made it legendary. Pasta alla Norma. Sicilian immigrants brought this eggplant masterpiece to American cities, where it became a badge of culinary sophistication in the 70s. While most Americans still viewed eggplant with suspicion, Italian neighborhoods knew this dish represented Mount Etna's volcanic soil, and Sicily's sun-baked poverty turned delicious. Eggplant sliced into rounds, salted to draw out bitterness, then fried in olive oil until golden and creamy inside. A simple tomato sauce cooked down with garlic and basil. Nothing fancy, but everything right. Rigatoni or penny held the sauce in its ridges. The dish came together with fried eggplant folded through, topped with ricotta salata, the salted aged version most Americans had never encountered. What made it distinctly 70s was home cooks substituting regular ricotta or even cottage cheese when they couldn't find the real thing. Italian delis in urban neighborhoods served it on Fridays. Adventurous suburbanites attempted it after Mediterranean cooking classes at adult education centers. It tasted like summer, tradition, and the old country most families had left behind generations ago. Tuna noodle casserole. This wasn't just a casserole, it was a cultural phenomenon that defined American home cooking through the 1970s. Born from post-war convenience culture, it reached its zenith during the decade of harvest gold appliances and energy consciousness. Canned tuna, cream of mushroom soup, frozen peas, and egg noodles combined in ratios mothers could make blindfolded. The magic came from crushed potato chips or cornflakes on top, adding crunch to creamy comfort. Assembled in minutes, baked for 30, it fed a family of 6 for under $2 even during inflation. The smell of it baking meant Wednesday night, meant mom was tired from her new job, meant normalcy in changing times. Kids traded notes at school about whose mother made it best. Some added cheese, others celery. A few rebels used cream of celery soup instead. Leftovers packed into school thermoses stayed warm until lunch. It represented American pragmatism, efficient, economical, and entirely acceptable at any dinner table from trailer parks to split levels. No apologies, no pretension, just dinner handled. Pasta with mushrooms and butter. Before Americans discovered wild mushrooms and truffle oil, this simple preparation represented elegant simplicity. In 1970s kitchens discovering that Italian food meant more than red sauce. Button mushrooms, the only variety most supermarkets carried, sliced thin and sautéed in real butter until golden and releasing their earthy juices. Garlic added depth, white wine added sophistication for those attempting continental cooking. Fettuccine or linguine, cooked softer than modern al dente standards, tossed directly into that buttery mushroom mixture. Heavy cream sometimes made an appearance, transforming it into something between stroganoff and Alfredo. Fresh parsley and parmesan finished it, though dried versions worked fine. What made it revolutionary was the restraint. No tomatoes, no meat, just letting mushrooms and butter create something quietly spectacular. Dinner party hosts served it as a sophisticated first course. Empty nest couples rediscovered simple pleasures with it. The dish whispered rather than shouted, proving that 70s cooking was beginning to understand that less could mean more, that quality ingredients deserved center stage. Sloppy Joe pasta bake. Someone's genius mother looked at sloppy joes dripping onto plates and thought, what if we contained this chaos in pasta? The result became a kid's favorite that adults secretly loved. Ground beef browned with onions, mixed with ketchup-based sloppy joe sauce from a can or scratch, then combined with elbow macaroni and shredded cheddar. The mixture went into casserole dishes and baked until the cheese melted into gooey submission and edges crisped slightly. It tasted like sloppy joes met macaroni and cheese at a potluck and decided to cohabitate. Served with green beans from a can and white bread, it represented peak American comfort food fusion. Kids loved it because it was messy food made neat, sweet tomato sauce coating every pasta piece. Parents loved it because 1 pound of hamburger fed 6 people, and leftovers reheated perfectly in new microwave ovens that were becoming kitchen staples. School cafeterias attempted their own versions. It wasn't Italian, wasn't fancy, wasn't apologizing for being exactly what it was. Fettuccine al burro. While Americans called it fettuccine alfredo after a Roman restaurant popularized it, Italian immigrants knew this butter and cheese simplicity as fettuccine al burro, food for sick children and quick suppers. In the 70s, as Italian restaurants multiplied in suburbs beyond traditional urban neighborhoods, families discovered this dish represented minimalism before minimalism was trendy. Fresh fettuccine if you were lucky, dried if you weren't, cooked and immediately tossed with butter and Parmigiano Reggiano. The starch-rich pasta water helped create a creamy sauce with no cream involved, just emulsified butter and cheese. Freshly cracked black pepper, added bite. What made the 70s version distinct was heavy cream often sneaking in, making it richer and more forgiving for home cooks unfamiliar with proper pasta water techniques. Restaurants served it tableside from silver bowls, adding theater to simplicity. Home cooks discovered that 6 ingredients could create something that tasted expensive and elegant. Date nights featured it. Parents made it when kids needed comfort food that felt special. cheeseburger macaroni casserole, hamburger helper existed, but homemade versions tasted better and cost less. This was the battle cry of 1970s, home cooks refusing to surrender completely to convenience. Ground beef browned with onions, combined with cooked elbow macaroni, cream of mushroom or cream of cheddar soup, milk, and shredded American or cheddar cheese. Ketchup and mustard added that cheeseburger essence. Everything mixed in one pot on the stovetop or baked in the oven for a crusty top. The result tasted like a cheeseburger, and mac and cheese had children. Beefy, cheesy, vaguely tangy, completely satisfying. Kids called it hamburger stuff and ate it without complaint. Working mothers made it on rotation because it required one pot and fed a family with minimal cleanup. The processed cheese melted perfectly smooth, creating that glossy, kid-friendly sauce. Served with canned green beans or corn, white bread with margarine, it represented American family dinner at its most honest. Nobody was trying to impress anyone, just feed everyone something they'd actually eat. Lasagna. By the 1970s, lasagna had evolved from special occasion Italian-American feast into something attempted by households that had never seen Italy. The decades version involved layering cooked lasagna noodles, ricotta cheese, mixed with eggs and parsley, mozzarella, parmesan, and meat sauce that simmered for hours or came from jars that were becoming acceptable. Assembly required engineering skills, alternating layers in rectangular pans until you ran out of something. Baked covered with foil until bubbly, then uncovered to brown the cheese into a golden, slightly crispy top. The result was messy, rich, filling, and festive enough for birthdays and holidays. What made it distinctly 70s was cottage cheese, often replacing ricotta because it was cheaper and creamier. Plus, those no-boil noodles hadn't been invented yet, so cooking a pound of lasagna without breaking half was its own achievement. Men who didn't cook would assemble lasagna, calling it construction rather than cooking. Every family had their version, their secrets, their fierce loyalty to their recipe being superior. Stuffed shells with cheese and meat. When lasagna felt too complicated, stuffed shells offered the same flavors with better portion control and less engineering. Large pasta shells boiled until just pliable enough to handle, then filled with ricotta or cottage cheese mixed with eggs, parsley, and sometimes cooked ground beef or Italian sausage. Each shell got packed tight, arranged in baking dishes, covered with tomato sauce, topped with mozzarella, then baked until bubbly and the shell's edges crisped slightly. The beauty was individual servings. Everyone got their own portion, no cutting, no messy collapses. Italian-American families made hundreds for holidays and froze them for quick suppers. Church ladies prepared trays for new mothers and grieving families. The cheese mixture oozed when you cut into them. Tomato sauce pooled around them. What made them 70s essential was their presence at every potluck, every buffet, every gathering where Italian food meant love and abundance. Kids loved them because they were basically pasta pockets of cheese. Adults loved them because they looked impressive but were surprisingly forgiving to make. Noodle kugel. Jewish families brought this sweet noodle pudding to potlucks where confused Gentile neighbors discovered dessert could be pasta. Wide egg noodles cooked soft, mixed with cottage cheese, sour cream, eggs, sugar, cinnamon, and sometimes raisins or crushed pineapple. The mixture baked in buttered pans until set and golden, creating something between casserole and cake. Served warm or room temperature, it confused people expecting savory pasta. The sweetness, the cinnamon, the custard-like texture didn't compute with their spaghetti and meatball worldview. But once you accepted noodle kugel on its own terms, it became addictive comfort food, especially around Jewish holidays when every grandmother insisted hers was the definitive version. Some topped it with cornflakes and butter. Others added apples. A few rebels made savory versions with onions and pepper. In the 1970s, America, as ethnic foods crossed cultural boundaries at suburban block parties and interfaith gatherings, noodle kugel represented the delicious confusion of discovering that not all pasta baked in a dish was Italian. Tortellini in broth. Before trendy bone broth and ramen shops, Italian grandmothers knew that pasta floating in rich broth cured everything from colds to heartbreak. Tortellini, those little meat or cheese-filled pasta navels, bobbed in homemade chicken or beef broth, seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and maybe a bay leaf. The good versions used broth simmered from Sunday's chicken carcass or beef bones. The acceptable versions used bouillon cubes, and nobody judged during busy weeks. Grated Parmesan melted into each bowl. Fresh parsley added color. Served in deep bowls with crusty bread for dunking, it represented Italian comfort food at its most essential. Nourishing, warming, uncomplicated. What made it distinctly 70s was the frozen tortellini becoming available in supermarkets, democratizing what had been fresh pasta shop or homemade territory. Sick kids got bowls of it. Winter nights demanded it. Italian restaurants served it as tortellini in brodo, while American homes just called it that pasta soup. Either way, it satisfied something primal about warm broth and tender pasta meeting in perfect harmony. Beef and noodle skillet. This was Midwestern comfort food condensed into one cast iron pan, popular across farm country and small towns throughout the 70s. Ground beef browned with onions, combined with cooked egg noodles, cream of mushroom soup, beef broth, and frozen mixed vegetables if mothers felt obligated toward nutrition. Everything cooked together in the same skillet, flavors mingling while dishes stayed minimal. Finished with sour cream stirred in at the end, creating a tangy richness. The result tasted like pot roast met stroganoff in a hurry, and decided shortcuts weren't shameful. Served straight from the skillet to plates, it represented efficient cooking for families where farming, factory work, or just life meant dinner needed to be fast, filling, and satisfying. Fathers who worked physical jobs ate seconds. Kids mopped up sauce with white bread. Leftovers, if any existed, went into school thermoses. It wasn't trying to be Italian, wasn't trying to be gourmet, wasn't apologizing for being pragmatic, hearty American food that got dinner done without fuss or pretension. Ravioli in light tomato sauce. Before fresh pasta sections existed in most grocery stores, canned ravioli meant Chef Boyardee, but frozen ravioli in the 70s represented a step toward sophistication. Cheese or meat-filled pillows boiled until tender, then topped with simple tomato sauce made from canned crushed tomatoes, garlic, basil, and olive oil. The key was restraint, enough sauce to coat but not drown the ravioli, letting their filling remain the star. Parmesan snow and fresh basil if you had it, dried if you didn't. What made this distinctly 70s was families discovering that pasta could be elegant without being elaborate. That store-bought shortcuts combined with homemade touches created something greater than the sum of parts. Dinner parties featured it as a first course. Romantic dinners centered around it with candles and cheap Chianti in basket bottles. Kids preferred the canned version, but ate this without complaint. It represented American home cooking beginning to understand Italian sensibilities. That good ingredients simply prepared could be spectacular. That you didn't need to smother everything in heavy sauces to make it special. Gnocchi in tomato sauce. Most Americans had never encountered these potato dumplings until Italian restaurants and specialty shops began introducing them in the 70s. Gnocchi, those pillowy, ridged potato pasta hybrids, represented exotic Italian cooking beyond spaghetti's familiar comfort. The frozen or refrigerated versions available in specialty stores got boiled until they floated, signaling readiness with a simplicity that felt almost magical. Topped with straightforward tomato sauce, butter and sage, or even just brown butter and Parmesan, They offered texture unlike any pasta Americans knew. Slightly chewy, almost fluffy, catching sauce in their ridges. What made them quintessentially 70s was adventurous home cooks attempting to make them from scratch, armed with Italian cookbook instructions and determination, often resulting in potato bullets instead of tender clouds. But store-bought versions democratized this Italian staple, letting families experience regional Italian cuisine without leaving their suburban homes. Served at dinner parties, they impressed guests unfamiliar with anything beyond spaghetti and lasagna. They whispered sophistication, suggested European travel and culinary worldliness, whether or not you'd ever left your state. Spaghetti carbonara. American versions of this Roman classic bore little resemblance to the Italian original, but that didn't stop it from becoming a 1970s favorite for families discovering that eggs could become pasta sauce. Bacon, the American substitute for a guanciale or pancetta, fried until crispy fat reserved. Spaghetti cooked and tossed with that hot bacon fat, beaten eggs, and Parmesan, the heat cooking the eggs into a creamy, clingy sauce. Black pepper, lots of it, added bite. The Italian version used no cream, but American cooks often added heavy cream for insurance against scrambled eggs, creating something richer and more forgiving for home cooks unfamiliar with the technique. Served immediately because it didn't wait or reheat well, it became a special occasion dish rather than weeknight rotation. What made it revolutionary was the concept that pasta sauce didn't need to simmer for hours. This came together in the time it took to boil water. Dinner party hosts discovered they could make impressive pasta while chatting with guests. No lengthy prep required. Pasta puttanesca. The name meant prostitute's pasta in Italian, supposedly because working women could make it quickly between clients, but American cookbooks politely called it pasta with olives and capers. In the 70s, as Americans slowly embraced bold flavors beyond ketchup and ranch dressing, puttanesca represented adventure: anchovies, capers, olives, garlic, and tomatoes, creating something intensely flavored and utterly unlike traditional American Italian red sauce. Garlic and anchovies melted into olive oil, creating an umami-rich base. Capers and olives added brininess. Crushed tomatoes tied it together. Red pepper flakes added heat. Tossed with spaghetti or linguine, it tasted complex, sophisticated, and slightly dangerous given its scandalous name. Italian neighborhoods had known it forever, but suburban families discovered it through Italian restaurants and adventurous cooking classes. The dish required no meat, making it economical and acceptable for meatless Fridays. What made it distinctly 70s was Americans overcoming their suspicion of anchovies and olives, discovering that pungent ingredients created depth rather than overwhelm. It announced that your palate had evolved, that you'd moved beyond basic red sauce into authentic Italian territory. Baked ravioli. Someone brilliant realized that ravioli didn't have to be boiled and sauced. It could be baked like lasagna for easier preparation and portion control. Frozen cheese or meat ravioli, arranged in baking dishes, covered with tomato sauce and mozzarella, then baked until bubbly and golden. The ravioli cooked directly in the sauce, absorbing flavors while releasing starches that thickened everything into cohesive deliciousness. The top layer got slightly crispy, cheese browned and bubbly, while underneath stayed creamy and rich. What made this perfect for 70s home cooks was the shortcut nature. No boiling pasta, no complicated layering, just dump and bake. Potlucks featured multiple versions. Church suppers relied on it. Working mothers discovered they could assemble it before work and bake it after, or make it ahead and freeze it for future busy nights. Kids loved it because every piece was self-contained, no messy sauce spills. Adults appreciated that it looked and tasted impressive while requiring minimal effort. It represented the decade's perfect balance between convenience and homemade, shortcuts without shame, practical without being processed. Baked pasta with seafood. Coastal communities and Italian-American families knew baked pasta with seafood represented feast day food, special occasions when canned tuna didn't cut it. A mixture of shrimp, sometimes scallops or clams, combined with pasta shells or rigatoni, tomato sauce with white wine, garlic, and herbs. Everything went into baking dishes, topped with breadcrumbs mixed with parmesan and butter, then baked until the top crisped, and seafood perfumed the kitchen with ocean-scented promise. What made it distinctly 70s was frozen seafood becoming more available and affordable in inland areas, democratizing dishes that had been coastal privileges. Families celebrating anniversaries or hosting dinner parties made this as their showpiece. The combination of tender seafood, al dente pasta, and that crunchy golden topping created textural and flavor complexity that impressed guests and family alike. Served with crusty bread for sauce mopping and a simple green salad, it represented American home cooking's increasing sophistication. Understanding that special occasions deserved special food, that seafood and pasta together created something greater than either alone. Baked macaroni with tuna and peppers. This was tuna noodle casserole's more sophisticated cousin, popular in households discovering that bell peppers weren't just salad bar garnish. Elbow macaroni combined with canned tuna, diced bell peppers sautéed until softened, cream of celery soup, and a handful of shredded cheddar. What distinguished it from basic tuna casserole was those peppers adding sweetness and color, plus a topping of buttered breadcrumbs mixed with paprika for visual appeal. Baked until bubbling and golden, it represented home cooks elevating convenience food with fresh vegetables, showing that canned tuna could be the foundation for something colorful and interesting. Working mothers appreciated that it transformed pantry staples into something that looked thoughtful. Kids who normally refused peppers ate them here, hidden in creamy comfort. Served on weeknights when grocery shopping hadn't happened yet, it proved that a well-stocked pantry meant dinner was always possible. The dish whispered that shortcuts and fresh ingredients could coexist peacefully. That convenience didn't mean boring. Fricassee noodles with beef or turkey. This old-fashioned comfort dish combined French technique with American practicality, popular in homes where Sunday roasts became Monday's creative challenge. Leftover beef or turkey, shredded or cubed, simmered in a creamy sauce made from pan drippings, butter, flour, and milk or cream. Wide egg noodles cooked tender, then tossed directly into that rich gravy-like sauce. Mushrooms, peas, and pearl onions added vegetables and visual interest. What made Fricassee noodles distinctly 70s was the revival of these Depression-era stretcher meals as inflation made waste unacceptable. Grandmothers taught daughters techniques their mothers knew, creating multi-generational cooking moments. The dish arrived at the table steaming, creamy, and substantial enough to make yesterday's roast feel like today's planned dinner. Families gathered around it on cold evenings, the kind of meal that stuck to your ribs and reminded you that home cooking meant resourcefulness. Nothing fancy, nothing apologetic, just good food made from what you had, served with love and common sense. Macaroni loaf with ground meat. Someone looked at meatloaf and macaroni and decided they should cohabitate, creating this curious hybrid that became surprisingly popular in church cookbooks and community potlucks. Ground beef mixed with cooked elbow macaroni, beaten eggs as binder, breadcrumbs, diced onions, and enough ketchup to make it recognizable as meatloaf's relative. The mixture got packed into loaf pans, topped with more ketchup or tomato sauce, then baked until firm and sliceable. The result was meatloaf stretched with pasta, making 1 pound of beef feed 8 people instead of 4. Slices held together on plates, the macaroni creating structure while the meat provided flavor. What made it essentially 70s was that combination of economic necessity and culinary creativity. Families needed to stretch protein further as prices climbed, and mixing pasta into meatloaf accomplished that while still delivering something substantial and satisfying. Kids liked it because it was familiar and unfamiliar simultaneously. Adults appreciated its efficiency. Served with mashed potatoes and canned green beans, it represented American ingenuity making do without feeling deprived. Egg noodle kugel with cottage cheese. This was noodle kugel's savory cousin, popular in Jewish households, but making crossover appearances at interfaith potlucks, where it confused and delighted gentle neighbors. White egg noodles cooked soft, mixed with cottage cheese, sour cream, eggs, salt, pepper, and plenty of butter. Some versions added sautéed onions for depth. The mixture baked in buttered casserole dishes until set and golden, the top forming a slightly crispy crust while underneath stayed creamy and custardy. Served as a side dish rather than dessert, it occupied that curious middle ground between starch and dairy, comfort food that didn't fit in neat categories. What made it distinctly 70s was cottage cheese's reputation as health food, high protein, low calorie, doctor approved, which gave this rich, buttery dish a veneer of wholesomeness. Bar mitzvahs featured it alongside brisket. Shabbat dinners included it. Block parties introduced it to curious neighbors who discovered that Jewish cooking offered more than bagels and lox. It represented culinary boundary crossing, ethnic traditions becoming American mainstream. Roast goose. Before turkey monopolized Thanksgiving, roast goose ruled America's holiday tables like edible royalty. Throughout the 1800s and early 1900s, European immigrants, especially Germans, Scandinavians, and British families, brought goose roasting traditions across the Atlantic, making it the preferred centerpiece for special occasions. Geese thrived in small farmyards, requiring less space than turkeys while producing incredibly rich, fatty meat that self-basted during roasting. The preparation was a day-long affair. Cooks cleaned the goose thoroughly, pricked the skin all over with a fork to release abundant fat, then stuffed the cavity with apples, onions, and sage. The bird roasted for 3 to 4 hours at moderate heat, periodically basted with golden drippings. That rendered goose fat was liquid gold, carefully saved for frying potatoes and preserving foods throughout winter. The crispy mahogany skin crackled under the knife, revealing tender, dark meat with gamey richness turkey could never match. Roast goose meant prosperity in immigrant communities. Serving goose announced your family had made it in America while maintaining old-world traditions. Tomato aspic. Picture a shimmering, translucent red tower wobbling on your grandmother's best china. That's tomato aspic, the showstopper of mid-century Thanksgiving tables. From the 1920s through 1960s, this savory gelatin creation represented culinary sophistication and modern homemaking prowess. Commercial gelatin products, like Knox, transformed gelatin from a luxury requiring hours of boiling calves' hooves into a convenient pantry staple. Making tomato aspic required precision. Cooks dissolved unflavored gelatin in tomato juice seasoned with celery salt, Worcestershire sauce, lemon juice, and horseradish. The mixture poured into elaborate ring molds, often embedding celery pieces, olives, or cream cheese balls inside.